Okay, time is up. Thank you for joining this last session of the conference. I hope you all have had a great experience and found the valuable sessions. So this repeat session is about how to migrate to the new warehouse management system. So it's a solution that we acquired from Bluehorseshoe and released as part of Microsoft in AX 2012 R3 version. And what you may or may not know is that we do not support the legacy warehouse management 2 module in the new Dynamics 365 operations. And obviously, if you want to upgrade, you need to take a choice in that sense, what to do. And that's why we have this session, because we want to make you aware that we will support that process via a migration solution. So I really hope that after having attended this session that you will leave not only this room, but the whole technical conference for this year, and having a basic understanding of the complexity of needing to do a migration. When I say from WMS 2, the configuration key for that one, we also will support a migration for WMS 1, so basically having an item with a location defined to use the new warehousing setup. So that's at least what I hope that you'll be able to understand, this complexity of doing that. Also having an idea about the tooling concept that we will spend this session about explaining, what it can support you with, and also in case you do have customizations that need to be brought forward in the new warehousing, how to handle that situation. Then, of course, we want to reference you to some of the existing information about migration, where to go and search for more information. And we are very interested in receiving feedback. So when you, either during this session or after, come up here, leave the card, and we can have a talk about what you are having of needs, experiences, etc. You may even have done a migration already. So that's at least the hope for me that you will be able to have used this session for. So the agenda will be that we'll do an introduction about what we mean about migration. We'll walk through some of the current capabilities as we speak in market support, how to actually do this migration. And afterwards, we'll go into details about the planned delivery of a item dimension conversion tool supporting you. We'll go into details about the concept of this tool. We'll go into details about how this tool actually in a diagram flow will work, what kind of restrictions is existing. We'll show a demo about actually performing an actual migration process, and then also explain back to in case you have some customizations, how can you extend the tool. So I mentioned the word. We call this item dimension conversion. And what about the whole warehouse layout and all the warehouse processes, etc.? And well, for now, this is not our focus. We have received a lot of feedback that, of course, it can be very complex to set up the whole warehouse, but really seen from the legacy running warehouse, it's not a one-to-one migration mapping. You typically would like to change your flows because you suddenly have completely new functionality, and you can actually set up your warehouse flow and your business processes in a much richer manner. So it doesn't necessarily make sense to make a migration, let's call it one-to-one, from how you run it today and how you will perform the business operations in the new warehouse solution. So with that, I actually would like to ask how many of you are running at all, are any customers present? Yeah? And are any of those customers running a WMS2 solution and Dynamics 365? No? You can't. That was a trick question. 2012 version? 2009? Okay, good. So how many are running WMS1? You are running both? Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. Okay, and the rest for the partners, any one of you right now in the process of running a migration or in very near future foresee having a migration need? Yes? Okay. WMS2, WMS1, both? WMS1, 2, 2, 2? Okay. So we have a mix. This is great. So, the presenters here today, yeah, Pelle Lyrup, that's me. Vanya is one of our greater engineers. We are both working out of the R&D in Copenhagen, Denmark. And it is, as you can imagine, rather not so easy thing. That's also why we in R&D have taken, and we need to support the partner channels in making this conversion from an existing solution to the new warehousing solution. Of course, as Microsoft, we need to support that when we are deprecating a module, right? We need to support that you can continue using the product in the new version. So that's why we are now making this tool available for the next release. So with that, let's go directly into kind of a quick introduction about the complexity of migration. We've done a lot of sessions at technical conferences during the last years about migration. The whole architecture, the difference between all the data entities and the legacy solution and in the new solution, running about how the different business processes needs to be handled. So I encourage you to go and download those presentations. They have also been recorded, and you can view that when you get back from previous of these sessions. So this session will not go into details about how your warehouse layout should be migrated. So that's already covered. You can view this again. We obviously need to have something available in the new solution. We need to have the locations. We need to have whatever we have in the new one called location profiles and location formats and location types, etc. So, and again, some of it can basically be, like copy-pasted one-to-one. Those of you that have attended the hands-on lab of how actually to set up a warehouse via a data package, maybe I've seen, well, it's actually simple if you know which data you're going to provide. At least this lab shows you how quickly you can create a new site, warehouse, locations, all the needed things around a location, and also enable all the business logic related to a process, a business process that goes for inbound. So for instance, if you're in your legacy warehouse management 2 solution, use either item arrival journal process, you use a pallet transport to guide you to where to put away, how actually to enable this process in the new warehouse module. We have work templates, location directives, and this demo of the hands-on lab actually show how simple that can be done. We'll not cover that in this session. Go and view the recording already done from the previous years. So that also goes for the outbound process. If you have the warehouse management tool running consolidated output orders, where you consolidate different sales orders, do a full pallet picking process, put it to staging before you actually ship out and run your shipment templates in the legacy WMS2 solution. We do explain how you can migrate those business processes in previous presentations. So again, not a topic for this session. And I can continue, of course, for the internal warehouse operations. The most typically complex setting is related to the mean max replenishment and the counting needs. We obviously need to have a need for setting up. Well, if I want to do a periodically cycle counting operation, how do I actually process that in the new solution compared with how I did it in my previous WMS2 solution? Yeah, WMS2 solutions, you'll use the counting journals, and you will have set up some policies related to the item about counting groups, etc. How do I actually migrate that business process in the new solution? We also have touched upon that in previous presentations. We do have very and much richer capabilities in the new one, where we can do cycle count plans. We can define a lot of business processes related to how you actually perform the actual counting. We can request recounting processes. We have approval processes. So this is definitely an area where you can have a much better and more advanced process in the new warehouse module. Again, we will not touch this more. This is something you can go back and watch. What we do like to show is the very complex thing around our product master data, how to enable this, and also included the on-hand data. So things like, if you do want to migrate a solution, WMS2 solution, a WMS1 product, you have associated this one with a specific storage dimension group. In the new solution, we will need to change this storage dimension group, because that's one of the places where we enable that we actually can process this new warehouse management. There's a small checkbox, use warehouse management processes, which is extremely important on the storage dimension group. And that one drives several business logic as well. First and foremost, it drives that we have a complete new reservation concept. We actually save our reservation in new data, new entities. It's not the same reservation concept. You need to associate a reservation hierarchy to your products, and you have the option to run reservation on multiple levels. So that, of course, makes a complexity in case, which we will show you, running a migration with existing open transactions also having reservation. So just to give you an idea, how many of you have an idea about the reservation hierarchy and then the new reservation strategy and methods? I'm glad you raised your hand. Yeah, okay. Okay, well, some at least. So we'll definitely come more back to this. But as you can see just on this one, this is actually a slide from the presentation we did last year again, I can't remember. Never mind. So, of course, nothing really have changed in kind of the conceptual one-to-one mapping, and this is just my interpretation about how I see the existing table structures to be represented in the new warehousing module. So we'll come back to this reservation. when we do also the demo. Why are we doing this tooling support? Well, I mentioned that it is a complex thing and you need to be aware about the complexity. But we also, of course, listen to the feedback received. Because today, without the new tooling we'll show you, you can't do a migration. I mean, you simply need to close out all your transactions, right? Remove all inventory in hand for that specific item you want to migrate. Run the inventory closing. Everything is financially closed. Everything is settled. Everything is good. And then you are allowed to change this storage dimension group for this specific item. And then, of course, you need to set up the must-have mandatory fields related to the product, like we need to have a unit sequence groups defined, etc., and the reservation hierarchy, and you're up rolling, right? So that, no problem. But is it not a problem? Yes, of course it is a problem, because you cannot necessarily just close out your inventory and think everything is fine. So we definitely have listened to this feedback. We knew, but now we are in a situation where we will support you because we have this deprecated module that we would like you to use, the new warehouse module. So a production facility with a long BOM structure with open production orders for many months, right? Just close out everything, run the migration, and then reestablish all of this. It's, I mean, really, for 1,000 of products, right? It's really not an option. So what can we do about that? Well, we have made a new tool available. We haven't settled, and must admit this is important for us to note that what we will present is something we are working on as we speak. So it's working completely in process, and that's why we would like to receive feedback as well. Right now, for this specific session, we named it just before we arrived to the airport, Item Dimension Conversion Tool. Whether this will be the name or not, we don't know. But at least it indicates kind of the level of what this tool can do. So again, it's around products, on hand, transactions, reservation. It's not a tool support for warehouse layout and warehouse processes. Okay? I think I stressed out what we mean by that now.
So what we wanted to show you now about the tool itself is just a quick overview of what it actually does. So we'll go into each of the larger blocks in more detail in the following slides. Obviously, it all starts with the actual data upgrade from AX 2012 R3. And as part of that upgrade, some of the items, so the items that use the pallet dimension, they will be blocked. You will not be able to use them once you upgrade, which means that you will have to migrate them, and you will enter the item so you can do it iteratively. You do not need to migrate all of the items at once. You can slowly migrate them one at a time or more. And for each item, there will be a set of validation rules that will need to run. And if everything is fine, then we will actually update all of the data in a bunch of tables that I will show you later on. So, upgrade is obviously much larger than just these two little boxes here, but this is what is important to understand specifically around the migration for advanced warehousing. And the first and foremost is if you have unprocessed consolidated output orders or pallet transports in your AX 2012 installation, we will fail the upgrade because these two processes are not supported. They are WMS2 bound. So they are not supported in the new version. So you will need to either close out those orders or redo them and use just the WMS1 as an example. And then, as part of the upgrade, for each of the items that have the palette dimension enabled, we will put them in a special blocked items list, which will then ensure that in the new version after the upgrade, if you try to do any sort of inventory updates, it will fail, telling you that this item is blocked and needs to be migrated first. So the rest of this assumes that you have actually finished the upgrade and you are running in your Dynamics 365 for operations. And potentially some of your items are blocked. So if you're not using WMS2, obviously they wouldn't be. This is some of the validation as of today, which we do. And there are basically two streams of when you can succeed in migrating an item. The first one is if you want to downgrade the item so that instead of using WMS2, for example, it only will use WMS1 in the new system. And the second one, the more advanced, is if you want to use the new advanced warehousing capabilities, but then there are a set of restrictions. So as many of you might know, in Dynamics 365 for operations, we do not support integration between catch weight and advanced warehousing. So if in AX 2012 your item was a catch weight item that was using WMS2, you will not be able to make it a advanced warehousing item in the new system. You will either need to downgrade it to a WMS1 or rework your setup in the legacy system. So that's kind of the more important things to call out here. I will not go through all of it. We've added a little bit more detail to these slides so that, once you actually start the migration, you can go back and reference them, and especially if you will need to customize some of the flows, then it will help out. Just one other important validation to call out is, so as the palette dimension is not supported in Dynamics 365 for operations, the replacement, one-to-one replacement for palettes is the license plate dimension. And as I hope all of you know, license plate are stored on locations, and locations can be either license plate tracked or not non-license plate tracked. So for non-license plate tracked location, you cannot specify a license plate, right? You just put the items directly on the floor, for example. So we will ensure that you actually do not have any on hand on pallets in the legacy system, or as of the legacy system, that would be in the new system stored on non-LP tracked locations, which makes sense. Okay, and this is the actual migration flow, part one. So the first and foremost, what we will do is we will just directly convert all of the pallets to license plates, one-to-one. So we will reuse the pallet IDs for the newly generated license plates, and we will directly update all of the inventory dimension records, the InvenDim records, so that we don't need to change the actual data behind. And then we will populate, based on the items that you have selected to migrate, for each item, I'll show in the demo, you will populate which storage dimension group it should use, which reservation hierarchy it should use, and which unit sequence group it should use. So based on those, for the multiple items that you have entered, we will try to group them into what we call conversion groups. And this is, well, the primary reason is just for performance, because as you can understand, this tool will update a lot of data, so it will take time. And this is one of the questions that we will ask you, is what are your performance expectations for how long this should take on a typical installation? Do you have a question? No? Yes, so when we migrate the items, this is after the upgrade, and it assumes that you have done all of the steps that Per walked through, migrating the warehouse layout, the processes configuration, and so forth. So this is specifically for the items and the on-hand and the reservations. So once we've identified the conversion groups, we will go and look through the entire AOT and find all of the tables that have references to the inventory dimensions. And we will remember those, again, for performance reasons, kind of caching them. And then we will initiate the process where we identify that for each of these tables that we have found that needs an inventory dimension update, we will record the value that we need to update from, and then we will generate a new inventory dimension that we will update to. The difference there being, so in the new storage dimension group, one of the dimensions that is active that you cannot disable is the inventory status. So this will be defaulted. The way that we have designed it as of today is that we will just use the default inventory status that you specify on the warehouse parameters. So there will just be one for all of the inventory that you get. You can, of course, change the status later on, but if it is important for you that you have the flexibility of assigning more inventory statuses, you should let us know. And then we come to the most important validation that will be performed. Before anything is kind of committed, we will ensure that these new values that we have calculated, if we were to use them, that they will not lead to invalid transactions. And when I say invalid transactions, what I mean is transactions that have reservation holes as a result. I will talk a little bit more and show you an example of what a reservation hole can be, but this is one of the kind of critical moments with the new reservation engine is that we cannot allow. And there will be cases where this happens, depending on how you have reserved inventory in your legacy system. I will talk about the ways that we can that you can address those. But if everything is okay, then we will proceed and in parallel update all of these tables, replacing the inventory dimensions. Obviously, there's a lot of tables. There are special cases. There are tables that might exist in your customizations. So all of that needs to be taken into consideration. Then when everything is done, we can update the item, marking the, setting the new storage dimension group, reservation hierarchy, unit sequence group, and all the related kind of tables, like making sure that the item is WHS enabled, that it's TMS enabled, and so forth. Once we updated the items, we will invoke the standard on-hand recalculation job. What that will do is it will get rid of all of your on-hand temporarily and recalculate it based on your inventory transactions. The main purpose of this job here is that it will also populate all of the advanced warehousing specific tables like WHS Invent Reserve, which contains the on-hand information and the reservation information for the different levels of inventory dimensions. And once that succeeds, we will unblock the items if they were blocked, and the migration will be completed. So obviously there are a number of restrictions that are in play, and Per will walk you through them.
Yep. So some of them already kind of mentioned during the diagram flow. First one was the inventory status value. Right now, what we have decided to do to make it as fast as possible and make it ready is to just take one default inventory status and use that one for all the transaction and DIM updates. So that's kind of it. And we do not allow this status to be blocked. If you're familiar with this, an inventory status can be selected with a blocking state, and if you do that, you will actually reserve from the inventory status and all the way up in this reservation hierarchy. This is not an option as part of the migration. It cannot be blocking inventory status. As Vanya mentioned, the catch weight, we do recommend in this sense to use one of the ISV solutions. and we actually have one here in the room. So that's really an option to use the migration and then keep on processing catch weight enabled products as part of your using the new warehouse management module. It's just not right now supported out of the box, so you need an ISV solution for that. And then the storage dimension. Oh yeah, anyone using catch weight? Yeah. Not in the room. Okay, but never mind. Storage and also the tracking dimension group. So the setup for that, we will have some. We will cover that. Limitations of we cannot just migrate from and to and have completely different setup. Things like the financial tracking, etc. We'll go into details about that. Another thing we do with this migration is that we do update per company. So in case you do have a 2012 version running where you have defined the storage dimension group on the shared product level, and thereby you're not able to override that per legal entity, you will need to loosen up for that and have your shared setup storage dimension group to be blank, and thereby also allowing to update per company, because that's how the update and migration is getting processed, is per company. Vanja mentioned the pallet becoming a license plate. In the WMS2 solution, we do allow having a pallet on hand on a location and also inventory on hand which is not on a pallet, so kind of in a mixed mode, just put on the floor. In the new warehouse management solution, we do not support this kind of mixed mode. It's either it's a license plate track location or it's a non-license plate track location. So in case you do have some on hand on a pallet for the same item number and also item directly on the location, you'll need to move it either on the pallet or on the floor. And the pallet will need to be removed. So yet a kind of a restriction. We also, and we'll definitely need to go into details about the whole reservation story. We keep coming back to this. This reservation hierarchy, which is a lot complex in the new one, it really depends on also the setup. If you're running with batch numbers, for instance, do you then now in the new module associate the batch number as part of the reservation hierarchy above the location or below the location? And that's kind of a normal thing we keep saying. Those of you that are not familiar with the difference, it's a very big difference, because if you put the batch number in this reservation hierarchy above the location, it's the sales order, transfer order that is kind of deciding the reservation. It will pick and reserve on this specific batch number, and the warehouse processes must kind of follow that reservation and pick this specific batch ID. Where if you put the batch below, it means that it is the warehouse operation setup that run and decide which batch number to go and pick in an optimized way, more picking the fastest route depending on the location structures, but also things like a FIFO, FIFO, etc. Though we do not yet support all the process industry functionality unless you have the batch above. So there are some things here you need to consider. If you put it below and we reserve, we will need to populate value all the way down also on the location. Vanja will come into details, also show that in the demo. So back to the storage dimension limitations. This is maybe a little too color-coded slide, but let me try to explain. So the green, yes, one means that we enforce that the dimension that you actually migrate from the storage dimension group does have a site, warehouse, and for now also location. We may lose up on that going forward, but at least for now, this is kind of the required dimensions that you need to have active. And as mentioned, the palette can be both, WMS1 process or using the WMS2 with or without the palette dimension active. Physical inventory must be, and that's the reason for that is that this is required when we go to the newer module of Advanced Warehouse Management. Financially tracked, not as much difference here, although we will require that the two-dimension are having the same setup. We cannot allow you to suddenly, in your previous version, running, for instance, with a financial track warehouse dimension, and then in the new two storage dimension group, having an opposite setting. That will not fly because your cost, etc., will not be correct. So you can go and read this yourself and download the slides. At the bottom of this PowerPoint presentation, we also have included the two storage dimension group settings, and the same actually goes for the tracking dimension group. You may, though, wonder and say, yeah, but tracking dimension group, that's not where I define whether it's a warehouse management process enabled, and that's correct. But again, consider that this will depend on how you will define your reservation hierarchy. We do, for example, not allow you to have a serial number active tracking dimension group, and then allow blank issue, blank receipt, and then in this reservation hierarchy, having this serial number somewhere higher in the reservation hierarchy. We only allow that if it's all the way down to the bottom of the reservation hierarchy, because otherwise we do not know whether we should reserve against a blank, non-specified dimension value or a specific serial number ID. So there are some restrictions that you need to pay attention to during this migration process.
All right. So as we mentioned multiple times now, the holes in the reservation is not something that we can allow after the migration. And this is, again, a slide from one of the previous tech conference presentations. And I will show you an example as part of my demo.
So question is related to intercompany orders, whether we foresee an issue. Potentially we do, yes, depending on the synchronization of the transactions with the pallet ID, and because we do the migration per company. The good thing, though, is that the reservation hierarchy is only going to be defined, of course, and you only migrate, let's say it's from the sending side or from the receiving side, really doesn't matter, right? So the issue would be that whatever pallet license plate ID, the item will definitely be blocked if you run pallet, right? So on the other side of that, you will not have this pallet license plate on the other legal entity. So yes, but it hopefully should work even though when you do the actual receipt issue peaking on both sides. You need to make sure that you have migrated, if it's with pallet, in all companies.
So we've added a new form to the solution called, as of right now, Warehouse Management 2 Migration. That will probably change. So what I have created some data for the demo. So I have created a WMS1 enabled item, and I want to make it a advanced warehousing item now. I have configured it to be a batch tracked item, and right now I will say that I want it to be a batch below reservation hierarchy, so I will allow the warehouse to decide which batch to pick. And I will also select a unit sequence group saying that I track my item in eaches. When I'm entering it, it does all sorts of validation, as we saw on the slides, to make sure that I enter a legal setup. So if, for example, my WMS2 item, so I've created one which has a pallet dimension, it does not have the batch active or serial, so I should not be able to select the batch reservation hierarchy or the serial one. I should only be able to select the default one, which does not have the tracking dimensions as part of it. Same for the unit sequence group. I should not be able to select one that does not match. So this is standard validation that's currently executing when you just create a new product. So it will ensure that the inventory unit of this item matches the first unit in the sequence group.
Do you think you will add a query to select like a group of items at one time?
So I'll start by showing something, and then Pierre will continue. So we have this items blocked for inventory updates, which has the list of all the items that are blocked as part of the upgrade. This will contain all of the advanced warehouse management, the WMS2 items that had pallet active, and we will add support for adding the items to migrate based on that list. We haven't really considered creating like a query, but that definitely is possible.
So, to be frank, we have a lot of great ideas, but we also need to finalize before we ship. So at least the idea is at least you can select, multi-select, and get that in, writing queries and make your own grouping concept, etc. Have a lower priority.
As Pierre just mentioned, this will go out, plan of record, as part of the spring release. So we are working hard to finish it up before then. So I've started the migration, and the migration runs as a batch job, which you can see here that it was added to the queue. I have started the batch service, so it should soon be picked up and start running. If we look at the migration jobs, we can see that the job is here, still waiting, so the batch server will pick it up within 1 minute or so. I'll just quickly show you for those that are not familiar. This is the standard batch jobs and tasks. So they have dependencies and everything, and you can view the logs. So we will take a closer look at this once it fails. And we expect that it will fail because of the data that I have set up. So I'll walk you through what it is that I actually have set up right now. So I have the WMS1 item where I have set up a few orders. So I've added on hand. This is a reference category 13 here in the inventory transactions. I've added on hand on this WMS1 location in warehouse 61. And as you can see, the inventory dimension ID here corresponds to this one. So it has the batch number as well. But I also have a sales order, this one, an issue transaction for this item. And it has, it's from warehouse 51. I have not specified a location when reserving, but I have specified a batch number. So you might not realize this, but this will lead to a reservation hole later on when we migrate, because what will happen is that I will have site, warehouse, status. Those are dimensions above the location. And then I will have a dimension specified which is below the location, but I will not have the location specified. So there will be a hole in the reservation hierarchy. And then there is a purchase order tied to that sales order. So the transaction is reserved ordered. And it's also with all those dimensions. But what I've also done is I have created a new table called rental order line, which has an inventory dimension field, the rental inventory dim ID, and an item ID field. So kind of a typical order line looking table with some quantity. And I have done this to show case the fact that we will warn you, or will actually fail the migration if you have not handled certain tables like this one. So the WMS2 setup that I have done is, so first we can see that it is in fact blocked. Invent update blocked item is the table which we populate during upgrade. And then I have added some on hand for this item with this invent dim ID, which is on site 5, warehouse 51 on this location, and it has a pallet ID specified. So this is on Dynamics 365 for operations. So you might ask, hold on, how can you have a pallet if that is removed? So what we have done is we got rid of the WMS2, WMS Advanced, I think was the right name, configuration key, but we have added a different one called WMS Advanced Migration, which we have set only on the entities that we need to enable the migration. In functionality, it is similar to the sys obsolete configuration keys. So the expectation is that once the migration is complete, you will turn that configuration key off. So I've added a record for the advanced, the WMS2 item to my rental order lines as well, also with the pallet dimension. And then you can see, even though on my transactions I only use this inventory dimension ID, there are some additional ones that exist that also have the pallet specified that were created as part of, creating the on hand and so forth, like temporary, semi-temporary invent dims. So this is the setup that I have. Let's see how far our job is. So it's still executing, so I got time to. So you can see there's a number of tasks that it created. And you can see the population of temporary data for the inventory dimensions has failed, so it will soon terminate the rest of the jobs as well. So if we look at the reason why it failed, through the log button, we can see that handling of inventory dimensions migration for table rental order line, the table that I created, and this particular field is required. Please ensure that a handler is implemented to determine if conversion for the table is required. So, pretty clear message telling me I need to do something. And I will do that. So if we look at the code here, so I have the solution. And this is the task initiator is one of the classes so we will describe the design and the important classes in a wiki article or a blog post once this is released. For now, what I wanted to show is just that there is this delegate table with inventory dimension discovery. And if we find the handlers, we can see there is one here, which is the one we added. So we actually, ourselves are subscribing to that delegate and implementing all of the logic for this particular type of conversion in the delegate. That is to enable other types of conversions. So you can see right in here in the first lines, we are exiting early if the conversion type is not a storage dimension conversion, the WMS2 migration. So we plan to support additional item conversion scenarios in the future. One example could be the related to consignment with the owner dimension, but there might be others as well. And what we do in here is that we go through all of the tables that are in the system that we have identified that require some sort of handling. A lot of them are kind of standard, so they can be handled in a common way. Most of these are like that, but there are also some special cases. I will show you one in a second. And then there is also a large list of tables that we deemed not requiring handling. So they will not be updated. So what we need to do, and let me first just check that this is still executing. So one of the examples of Kanban job, one of the examples of a special kind of table that requires special handling is this one, and obviously this is also supported. So what is special about the Kanban jobs? I don't know how many know this part of the Lean functionality that we ship, is that it has an inventory dimension ID field on it, but it does not have an item ID corresponding to it. The item ID is actually discovered through a reference on the Kanban. So the Kanban job reference is a Kanban, which is actually linked to the Kanban job. So if we look at one of the specific implementations for how this is processed, we can see that it's really, and I guess this is important to note, that we skip all of the data methods because all we are doing is updating the invendim field from one value to another. So we don't want all of the logic that comes with the standard update methods kicking in. So you can do that as well if you have special needs. Otherwise, as in the case of my rental order line table, we do not require that. So all we need to do is implement the delegate, subscribe to that, as you can see here. And I hope that all of you got the chance to attend. I don't know if many of you are developer focused, but we had a session and you might have heard that overlayering is not the way to go and you should use extensions. So you can see here that I actually created this rental order line in a separate model, in a separate package, and I use extensions through delegates to still executing. Takes a while sometimes with this batch job framework. Obviously, it's not, it's negligible, the time that it takes to just do all the finalization steps. But yeah, in a demo where there's only very little data, it's not as nice. Let's just give it a little more time. So what the handler does is very similar to what the standard one did. So we bail out if this is not the type of conversion that we want. And then we create the task creator. So all of it is, as I mentioned, batch tasks. So this will create the corresponding batch tasks to handle this particular table, because all of it is done in parallel to optimize performance. So on good large servers, this should run pretty fast. And here we just create a standard task for handling a table that has an item ID field and obviously the inventory dimension field as well. So the table ID and the inventory dimension fields are already known. What we do need to specify is what the item ID field is and also what the data area ID is. This is for the case where the table is shared or global, right? We need to make sure that we update the right company data. And we return true, meaning that we do need to handle this table, and we have created the task for it. Note that I'm not returning anything else in the like the rest of the handler. Like I don't return false, and this is very important. You should only handle what you are responsible for. So you should only handle, for example, the rental order line. You should not return results otherwise. So this is a good practice. So hopefully it's still running. That's taking a while. Let's see which task it's stuck on. Okay, this should know. Still waiting. Well, I guess then, while we wait, I need to recompile the solution to enable this customization, and I don't want to start doing that before it finishes. So what I will show you in the meantime is an example of the reservation hierarchy thing that we were talking about. So this is a typical example of how WHS Invent Reserve looks, more or less, if it's, denormalized. As I mentioned that, both the inventory, so the available physical and ordered quantities, as well as the reservation, so the reserved quantities, are stored per multiple levels. So we have, as you can see, for example, the physical on hand, we are storing on the lowest level. So we have both the license plate and the site and the warehouse and the inventory status and the location specified here. And all of the levels above that will also have those numbers. While, for example, this reservation of 2 is on the inventory status level, which is basically above location. So this might be some sort of a sales order reservation, for example. And as you can see, it's replicated on all levels above the location as well as the item level. So it looks relatively simple in the table. The problems for people that use the new system start when they try to look at the on-hand information, and they get confused because of, you cannot just aggregate these numbers now. You cannot sum this up. It will give you misleading results. Because especially if you have on hand in 2 different locations and reservations that can take either one of the other location, you cannot just say that both of them have the reserved physical quantity. So this is one of the white papers that we have published. This is for AX 2012 R3, but it hasn't changed since. That explains in detail everything about the new reservation engine. So I encourage you to look that up. It's linked from the presentation as well, and you can just probably find it through our blog. And the specific problem that we must avoid, right, is that we suddenly, as a result of the migration, for example, do not have this location specified. So assume that this is not license plate, but the batch, as in the example that I'm showing in the demo. So we have, site, warehouse, we will get this default inventory status assigned. We did not have any location, but we did have the batch number specified, right? So there's a hole which kind of breaks down the representation of the on-hand and the reservation in the system. So we cannot allow this. We need you to either fill up this hole by specifying all of the necessary dimensions up to the level of the lowest reservation, or you need to remove the reservation and redo it, or, which is the example that I will show, you will need to change the reservation hierarchy, right? So in my case, I had a site, warehouse, the default status, and I had the batch number. But I have selected to use the batch below reservation hierarchy, assuming that nobody will be specifying the batch number at the order line level. That turned out not to be the case. And after doing some analysis, we have figured out, we actually do want, so the customers do specifically request particular batches for this item. So we want to change the reservation hierarchy to be batch above, which will then make sure that all of these dimensions need to be specified, but the location will be allowed to be blank. And that's the way that I will solve it for me. Okay, so finally it errored out. So let me just compile this. So basically what we've just done here with this code is we've added a handler for this particular table. It has successfully compiled. And that means that I can restart the migration once I re-enable the batch service, because it terminates if you do the compilation. So because we spend a little bit of time waiting for it to succeed, it's recompile, so I need to re-enter. What I will do now is I will skip one of the steps of the demo. What I was doing in the first presentation is I would run the migration again, which would lead to this reservation hole. So we would get an error again saying that you are trying to, put an invendim on a particular inventory transaction, which will lead to a reservation hole. So you cannot do that. And what I will do instead here is I will change the batch hierarchy to batch above, as I just described, and then I will start the migration this way. So this should now succeed. So we'll wait for that.
So while this one is running, just by curiosity, the ones that are planning to do this migration, is there any customizations like Vanya just showed where you have additional tables that you foresee having a need for being migrated, updated with in those current migrations? No. So they're running plain basic version.
I have a reverse question instead. So if it's a medium-sized warehouse with not complex rules around location directives, do you recommend to do a new implementation in D365, or do you recommend that we migrate to from WMS2 to D365 or collaboration?
Okay, so the question's related to whether all migration is needed or basically start from scratch.
The question is, what is your recommendation for a medium-sized warehouse which doesn't have very complex advanced rules? Would you recommend to set it up from scratch, since you have to set up in any ways, even if you're doing migration?
If you do not have any on hand or like information that you need from the prior version, then
So really setting up the warehouse, and we should, is not a big deal. I mean, of course you need to have the business knowledge about what the processes need to be, right? Which requires the knowledge. It is really the big thing is around keeping your transactions and porting those to the new solution. That is.
One thing in terms of migrating items, why don't we use DIXF with your reservation hierarchy, unit sequence complete, set storage dimension, rather than undergoing this migration item back? Is that a possibility?
no, because I mean, so the question was, why don't we use the data import-export framework for migrating the items, updating the storage dimension group and so forth? But so all of the data entities respect the exact same business validation rules as when you do it from the UI, and that means you are immediately blocked because you cannot change the storage dimension group for a released product unless it has no open transactions, which is what Per was showing. The current solution in market requires you to close everything out. Then you can switch the storage dimension group, assign the reservation hierarchy, the unit sequence group, and so forth, and then reapply all of the on-hand, and then you're good to go. But obviously that is not possible for most companies, which is why there is a need for a tool of some sort, which is not really the case for most of the warehouse layout and the configurations for the processes, right? Because it's more simple kind of data. So just to finish up on the extension capabilities, as I said, if you've added a new table with an invendim ID field, whether it's with an item ID or without an item ID. We provide the hook points that you can use to extend it and account for your additional customized tables. If you have added a new inventory dimension, whether that is a product dimension or a tracking dimension, we believe that you do not need to do anything extra. It will just be migrated along with the rest of the dimensions as it is. That obviously does not take into consideration the integration that you will need to do. Like if you had a new tracking dimension that was tightly integrated with the WMS2 processes, you will need to rewrite your code and account for this new dimension in the advanced warehousing flows. Or discontinue the dimension, I guess, is also an option. But
yeah, and as Vanja mentioned, definitely do go look at the blog posts. All links associated with what we have shown, the white papers, the previous presentations, etc., is actually put into this specific blog post here. And there's also a recommendation about how we did suggest that you could do it prior to making this tool, both when it comes to closing everything out, so not having any open transactions, and also what the tool is now capable of doing is also described. Now we have chosen to do it in a quite a different manner, so to make it more safe of making this conversion migration here.
so as you can see, the batch job has now ended. So we have successfully migrated those two items. If we look at the data now, so we still have the 3 transactions for the WMS1 item. The on-hand now has a new inventory dimension ID, 1053, which is this one. And as you can see, it has the new inventory status, the default one specified. Same for the sales order reservation and the purchase order. So the 1052 is the one that has the status applied but does not have the location. It does have the batch. So this is the batch above reservation hierarchy. And it has also updated the rental order line table, the one that I added. Same for the WMS2 item. As you can see, it disappeared from the blocked items list. So it is actually migrated and you can use it now. And the on-hand information is showing up as 1051. 1051 is this one, which has the status, the location, and note that it has the license plate instead of the pallet. And all of the other ones have been updated as well. So we do not have the pallet populated on any of the inventory dimensions anymore. And the rental order line has been updated as well. So what I want to show now, real quick, I think we are a little short on time, is that I can actually now use this item. So I'll start by just completing the purchase order. And I think it's important to highlight that, we talk a lot about enabling your items for, advanced warehousing, WHS. But that does not mean that you cannot use the legacy WMS1 processes for it. And that's precisely what I'm going to do here. I will go and use the standard registration flow. I will put it on this location. So this location is non-license plate tracked, so I do not need to specify the license plate. And I confirm the registration, which will update the transactions to registered for the receipt. And then we'll also go and find the corresponding issue transaction and update it from reserved ordered to reserved physical. Which means that now I have on hand available for my sales order, and I should be able to release it to the warehouse using the WHS flow. So this is my order, and if I want to confirm the reservation, I will see that it actually opens up the new WHS reservation form instead of the legacy one, which is used still for non-WHS enabled items. So this is the new form. And I should just be able to go and release it to warehouse. So assuming that you have already migrated your wave configuration and the work templates and the location directives, everything that is required for processing a WHS-enabled item, it will succeed, create the work as a result, and if we go and look at the work, we can see that it has indeed picked it up from the right location, and all the reservations and everything is updated as for a WHS item. So we've basically successfully migrated 2 items that we had on the list. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's kind of ended the session. We do have a couple of minutes left for questions. If not, do you think it will be something that will be? Yeah. So question is related to the migration process also being available on 2012 R3 version. So currently, no. I mean, so the problem is the same if you want that. So what is the typical way we do is that we always implement it in the newest versions, and then we evaluate the capabilities, the possibilities of performing backporting afterwards. So whether this is something that can at all be backported, etc., we will evaluate that when kind of the capability is in a release state of the current version that we are operating on. But it is exactly the same problem. I mean, the same entities. Exactly the same problem you'll have in case of migrating from in 2012. Yes.
And just something that we haven't really mentioned, but which is also a capability, is that you might actually be running Dynamics 365 for operations and just using WMS1, right? And then after some time, you might want to like in-house your warehousing operations and start using the advanced warehouse management, so you would be able to use this tool for that purpose as well, for migrating to advanced WHS.
Yeah, and I assume that's exactly what you are referring to, just on 2012.
On 2012, yeah.
So. Let's see whether this... I can't say anything about the technical thing, how easy it is to backport and what but that's the typical engineering phase we do. Implement a new, backport if possible.
And the backporting backlog is severely based on feedback specifically. So if you do need it, then raise your voice.
Time for one more question? Else, we will say thank you for this time. Hope to see you next year, if not before.